What is up, everyone? Hello and welcome back. First of all, before we get started today, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who's tuning into videos. I know it's been a little while since I've released one, so thank you so much for coming back and saying hello. I'm very excited to tell you all about the Fallout 76 Break It Early Test application, aka the beta. Just as a quick note, before we get started today, you get to look at my beautiful face for the entirety of this video. All of my game capture was done while I was streaming on Mixer, so I apologize if that offends anyone, but there you go. So on October 23rd, Bethesda Softworks released the application for their new and slightly mysterious Fallout 76. Since its announcement at the 2018 Xbox E3 briefing, many of us have been eagerly awaiting the chance to simply figure out exactly what it was. While it represents a prequel in the timeline taking place only 25 years after the bombs went off, rather than the 200 years later that was Fallout 3, Fallout 76 might represent just the next step forward in the series, expanding on concepts of progression and exploration to a greater degree than ever. The BETA has stated to be the first true look at the entire game, but Bethesda made it clear that catastrophic bugs and problems were absolutely possible. Now, I had the opportunity to wander around the West Virginian wasteland of Appalachia for the entirety of the test. What follows are my first impressions, take them as you will. The world of Fallout 76 is everything that you'd expect from a Fallout game and more. It's vast, it's beautiful, varied, and dense with points of interest and things to do. In my time in the game, I was only able to explore a small fraction of the map, but I was able to explore towns, caves, poisonous valleys, train depots, and much, much more. The world is rife with ghouls, maybe slightly more than is balanced for a single person. I think it's actually made to be more for player togetherness, but there's no shortage of quiet moments in between. The day-night cycle is also extremely important, so I don't know if you've heard, but in games there are days and there are nights, and the nights in this game are especially dark. They're so dark, in fact, that you actually need to whip out your flashlight. Unfortunately, the flashlight pretty much acts as a giant "I'm right here" beacon for all the enemies around you. However, it's important that you know that this makes for a pleasant change of pace during the PM hours. Another thing that I was pleasantly surprised to see was that Fallout 76 has implemented a Red Dead Redemption-esque treasure map system that shows you where to find stashes of loot based on hand-drawn pictures of the environment. This made for some pretty cool moments, and I really can't wait to experience more of them. The gameplay does not feel like a very large departure from what Fallout has always been. Guns were an important part of my time, but they'll never feel as good as an actual shooting game. You can hot swap between two weapons, but I didn't find any sort of radial menu to quick switch between, say, a pistol and a rifle and a shotgun and a melee weapon like I would have liked to, though I didn't look very hard. Ammo was plentiful, thankfully, in that respect. I felt taken care of. As for melees, I don't think I felt any different than the game's predecessors, at all. Another factor that separates the new Fallout from its predecessors is the inclusion of survival mechanics such as hunger and thirst. To me, these stats almost felt arbitrary, like bars that you had to keep full, else you receive like different debuffs such as decreased action point regeneration or increased likelihood of contracting disease. I'd have been much happier if there had been an actual benefit to keeping them full or completely hydrated. But for now, it just feels like a nuisance that needs reasonably constant attention. On another note, this may be just a function of being new to Appalachia, but almost the entirety of my 4-hour stint felt very exposed. I was very weak, I was very vulnerable. Even encountering moderately strong enemies felt like a death sentence due to being unable to do much damage, due to being unable to handle much incoming damage, and simply not being able to move fast enough to sprint away from the enemies. You literally couldn't escape. Now, there's a good chance that this will change as I learn to craft stronger armor and weapons, so I'm looking forward to that. But at least for this initial impression, I felt really weak. One of the main functions of the Break It Early Test application was to help figure out how the game runs in a live setting, get thousands of people to flood into the servers and push them hard to see how they might handle the load. All in all, I'm actually pretty surprised with how everything went from that perspective. There were a couple of instances where the frame rate stuttered or slowed down. Sometimes it outright froze for me, but that was only a couple times, and then one time I actually got fully booted from the server, but I was able to get right back in with only losing about 30 seconds of progress. Really not a big negative for me there. There was a little blip where I hit a ghoul with a melee and his neck stretched out, and he was technically dead, but he was just standing there with a stretched neck and stretched arm, so I think he was a little bit glitched as well. Also, there was another moment where frame rates would switch from what was a solid 30 frames per second over to what felt like 60 frames per second, but it would only do that for a moment and then drop back down to 30. It's like it was sprinting and then it got tired. But compared to the foreboding letter that they sent out to all the players a couple days ago, it felt like the test was actually pretty good. Finally, I wanted to address what I think most people are interested in. What did the game feel like? All in all, I think it felt like a Fallout game. The world, the exploration, the music, the flavor were all very familiar, and that was reassuring. I'm certain that many were worried about what it would be like to run into other players around the world, but my experience with PvP or even cooperative play was actually fairly muted. I was only killed by one other player, and that was because I chose to fight a player with better armor and weapons. Bad call. Thankfully, the only punishment for death is that you have to respawn at a nearby point of interest, having only dropped your junk, aka your crafting materials, which did not get picked up by anyone else. In fact, I'm not even sure anyone can pick them up. I'll have to confirm that. Other than that, I only encountered about half a dozen people in the 4 hours, and this was with everyone following a similar quest line through the same paths. I expect it'll be even more rare as the game matures. The other major difference in experience was instantly noticeable and an undeniably jarring lack of friendly NPCs. In previous Fallout games, NPCs gave quests, stories, conflicts, context, and meaning to make the barren wasteland feel more alive. Now, all this information is relayed through audio tapes and through computer station logs. While these forms of world building have always been around, they've never felt like the sole source. In fact, it was probably one of the weakest parts of the beta for me. This may be on purpose to provide the player with the true feeling of desolation in a recently wiped out land, but the characters of Fallout and even Skyrim have always been real highlights. I missed meeting the interesting personalities and helping them with their problems. Now I'm just following the whispers of people who have already passed. This decision to eliminate friendly NPCs altogether in favor of just other players feels like a miss to me. In the end, I feel like if you're a fan of Fallout, you're going to feel right at home. The world, the emotion, the sound, the enemies, everything contributes to this universe that we've become so familiar with. I love the volume of things that there are to do, to see, to explore, and to discover, and I know that I'm so far only scratched the surface. There is going to be a great story here, but I did only 2 or 3 story missions in the 4 hours, maybe. The rest was spent doing what I do best in Fallout, and that's to just wander around and explore. For that, Fallout 76 delivers handsomely. Where the game falters, I feel, was in the complete omission of what I think gave the games their heart. Not having other scripted characters to interact with made me feel almost entirely alone against the world, and that's very different for me. While there are still ways to interact and gain quests through text and audio, I miss talking to a person standing in front of me, and I'm not sure that there are currently any plans to introduce that later, or to simply stick with having players be the only, quote, NPCs that you see. The Break It Early test application was overall a great time. While there were some hiccups along the way, I foresee Fallout 76 to be a very large and interesting experience once the full game hits full release on November 14th. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out today. I really appreciate you sticking around and listening to my first impressions of the Fallout 76 BETA. Stick around for more later. I'm definitely going to be giving more thoughts as I learn more about the game and showing you hopefully some secrets and fun stuff that I learn about the game as I continue to play it. Have a wonderful day, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you would, please share this with your friends who are interested. I know a lot of people were very curious about this game and maintaining a wait-and-see mentality, so hopefully they can see some of the gameplay in this video and hear some of the thoughts here and make a decision based on that. Anyway, thank you so much again. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Later.